we're lucky to have him here today, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me say this. Despair is not an option. Giving up is not acceptable. None of us have the privilege of hiding under the covers as much as we might want to do that. The stakes for us, for our kids, for future generations, and for the planet is just too high. And in these difficult moments, and they are difficult, let us never ever forget that real change only occurs when ordinary people stand up against oppression and injustice. The oligarchs are enormously powerful. They control the economy. They control our political system to a large degree. They have enormous influence over the media. But from the bottom of my heart, I am convinced that they can be beaten. The American people have stood up to wealth and power in the past. We can do it today, and we can beat them. If we stand together and not let Trump and his allies divide us up by the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation, if we bring our people together, if we create an agenda that works for all and not just the few. Now, I'm not a PhD in mathematics, but I do know that 99% is a hell of a lot bigger number than 1%. So let me conclude by saying this. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're not going to leave you guys alone. We're going to keep pestering you. We hope you come out and you vote on that Supreme Court election. We hope that you call your Republican member of Congress here and tell them, you know what? The people of Wisconsin in this district do not want tax breaks for billionaires and cuts to Medicaid and education. And you know what? I think it would be a great idea for your congressman to hold a town meeting right here. It's called democracy. So, brothers and sisters, thank you again. This is an unbelievable turnout. Thank you all for coming. Let's go forward together. We're going to win this thing. Thank you.
We won the popular vote by big numbers and won counties in our country.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning. Members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order to the joint session. Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Every year, hundreds of people gather at Horsetail Fall in Yosemite to see a beautiful phenomenon. Under perfect conditions and timing, the falls will appear to glow like molten lava. The 650-meter fall is a small stream at the top of the famous El Capitan. Each year in mid to late February, the setting sun lines up to make magic happen. Catching an uninterrupted firefall on camera is rare. It needs to be warm enough that any remaining snow will melt and run over the edge, and clear skies are crucial. A single cloud blocking the sun's rays can ruin the effect.
The war in Ukraine has proven that trench warfare hasn't gone away in the 21st century. But Britain's army hasn't had to really think about this for the last 40 years. In recent weeks, Sir Keir Starmer said he was willing to put British troops into Ukraine.
The UK is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to support a deal, working together with our allies.
So to deploy in Ukraine, this generation of British soldiers must relearn the art of trench warfare. It's a lesson the British military has taken to heart. I visited them at a base in eastern Romania where soldiers were training in trenches as part of exercise Steadfast Dart. This was a rehearsal for war with Russia. Almost 3,000 British troops travelled across road, rail and sea, moving 730 vehicles, weapons and personnel at short notice from the UK to enact a rapid reinforcement of NATO's eastern flank. They were part of 10,000 NATO troops involved in the exercise, which is part of the newly formed Allied Reaction Force. The soldiers from the UK and Romania formed platoons, which then drilled out how to clear the enemy from trenches using grenades and firepower. The trench had interconnected positions, at points was 5 foot deep and had a frontage of 270 metres. The practice of trench warfare isn't just happening in Eastern Europe. British troops are also training with Ukrainian soldiers in trenches dug into British soil as part of Operation Interflex, replicating those found on the front line.
Slava Ukraini!
The British Army has spent decades focusing on counterinsurgency techniques rather than major conflicts between states. In Iraq and Afghanistan, troops focused on patrolling. It's arguably a political role, as their aim was to win the hearts and minds of a nation through patrolling and persuading the locals not to support insurgents. When you hear about trenches, you may think of fields in Flanders, but the last time British forces conducted trench warfare was during the Falklands War in 1982. Well, things have changed since then, namely drones, which give a bird's eye view of a trench. So while you can see into the enemy's trench, they can also see into yours. Before, troops could rely on a trench for hiding from ground level line of sight. Now, drones can spot targets from above and drop munitions with precision. This is not trench warfare as Wilfred Owen knew it. Now, there's nowhere to hide.
Trench clear!
The military knows that trench warfare is vital for future wars, and now it must hone those forgotten skills. It sounds like a tall order, but from what I've seen on the ground in Romania and various NATO exercises throughout Eastern Europe, as well as what's happening on our own British soil, I think it's clear that troops are up to the challenge.
So, Matt, I mean, this comes as the first phase of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It ended Saturday, and then the next day, Israel made the decision halting all aid entering Gaza. What went into Israel's decision here, and how is it just impacting the region so far, especially as they try and figure out this phase two?
Yes, well, this aid suspension is only a day old, so it doesn't sound as though we're seeing any real problems with this quite yet on the ground. But this has outraged the Palestinians and much of the Arab world. It was condemned by the United Nations as well, saying that this was essentially an illegal maneuver, cutting off aid and using aid as collective punishment against the Palestinians. Now, all of this is happening as there's some real impasse here. There doesn't appear to be any real negotiations to move from phase one of the agreement to phase two of the agreement, which would see a more permanent peace in the Gaza Strip and eventually the full withdrawal of Israeli soldiers from the Gaza Strip. So instead, it looks as though Hamas has rejected a proposal by the Israelis to extend phase one through the month of Ramadan, which just started, and also Passover, which is in mid-April. This was actually, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, a plan that was presented by Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. So now, without these negotiations and with Hamas refusing to extend phase one, it looks as though both sides have said they're prepared to go back to war. So that is a very threatening development and one that puts this whole very tenuous truce for the past 6 weeks into question.
Matt, explain, though, what the difference would really be for people who might not know of extending phase one versus phase two beginning. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. Phase one was essentially about exchanging hostage. Well, it was about bringing a modicum of peace to the Gaza Strip, halting the guns for those 6 weeks after about 15 months of brutal war in the Gaza Strip. Phase one saw every week an exchange of Palestinian prisoners for Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip. That happened about every Saturday. Now that has halted. The idea behind phase two would be that, as I was saying, it would be a full withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip and a more permanent treaty in the Gaza Strip. Now, the idea behind extending phase one through Ramadan and through Passover would be to continue those exchanges. But the fact is that Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, has made it clear that he wants to see the full destruction of Hamas and that he's unwilling to end the war before that. Guys.
$300 million lawsuit brought against Greenpeace over the environmental organization's involvement in protests opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline's construction is moving forward. This litigation was initiated by the pipeline's operator, Energy Transfer, which has accused Greenpeace of masterminding these demonstrations at the Standing Rock Reservation, while engaging in defamation, conspiracy, and other unlawful actions that harmed its business during the project's development. Earlier this week, we told you about the financial implications of this trial for Greenpeace. Now, opening statements have taken place at a North Dakota courthouse, and Greenpeace senior strategist Charlie Cray told us more about these legal proceedings.
The case itself has to do with claims on defamation, statements that Greenpeace allegedly made. The kinds of claims they're making are, frankly, ridiculous. But they have good counsel. They are laying out, to the best they can, a very aggressive argument about what happened and Greenpeace's roles.
Cray says Greenpeace had 6 representatives travel to the site of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, who only arrived after the demonstrations were already underway. He claims Energy Transfer's assertions Greenpeace orchestrated this movement are racially insensitive to the tribal leaders who first started raising awareness about the pipeline's impacts on Native communities.
This is a racist rewrite of the history of Standing Rock. By targeting Greenpeace, they're essentially displacing the leadership at the grassroots and tribal level of the movement that led the protests.
However, Energy Transfer countered these claims, saying the protests started out peaceful but took a turn after Greenpeace arrived on the scene, which was encouraged by the organization's 6 representatives training other demonstrators.
And they claimed that there was sort of an eco-conspiracy. Their lead attorney uses the phrase that Greenpeace instigated terrorist-like tactics by others.
Meanwhile, Greenpeace is also accusing Energy Transfer of infringing on their First Amendment rights by filing this lawsuit, with Cray saying the company is attempting to silence them.
It's just wrong, and it just reflects the real intention of this case, which is to muzzle movement groups, to squash their critics, and to divide the movement itself. I think they're going after Greenpeace because they don't want to see organizations like Greenpeace join activists on the front lines of the climate justice movement.
Energy Transfer contends that, contrary to these claims, their lawsuit against Greenpeace is not about free speech, but rather about the organization not following the law, alleging Greenpeace illegally harmed its reputation by falsely claiming Energy Transfer was careless in its management of the project, and that the company's security contractors used extreme violence against peaceful demonstrators. Statements which caused 8 banks to back out of financing the pipeline's construction. Looking ahead, the trial is set to last for 5 weeks before jury deliberations begin, after which Greenpeace will have an opportunity to appeal the ruling, should it not go in their favor.
No matter what happens, we will have a legal recourse to appeal, and we will have a chance to appeal this, and we will appeal if necessary in the state Supreme Court.
Fascism is a cult of the leader who promises national restoration in the face of supposed humiliation by immigrants, leftists, liberals, minorities, homosexuals, women, in the face of what the fascist leader says is a takeover of the country's media, cultural institutions, schools by these forces. When thinking about fascism, you can't think about these individual elements in isolation. They come as a bundle. All nationalism involves a mythic past. In the past, we were great. And then the fascist leader says, that has been taken from you by the leftists and communists. They want to weaken our military. They want to weaken our greatness. In political propaganda, your main message is something other than the information you're conveying. It's based around a friend-enemy distinction. The political opponent, they are a merciless threat to your very existence and your traditions. Fascist propaganda is based on the idea that the other are fundamentally opposed to the nation. Fascism is a cult of the leader. It involves the leader setting the rules about what's true and false. So any kind of expertise, reality, all of that is a challenge to the authority of the leader. The center of democracy is truth. You're not free if you've been lied to. Nobody thinks the people of North Korea are free. The people of North Korea will vote for dear leader every time because they've been lied to. It's not a free vote because they don't have access to the truth. Equality similarly requires truth. So if you're going to rip the heart out of democracy, you get people used to lies. Hierarchy is central here because it's the big lie at the center of things. What is racism but one big lie? Racism is the lie that one group is better than another. And then once you have hierarchy set up, you can make people very nervous and frightened about losing their position on that hierarchy. Once you convince people that they are justifiably higher on the hierarchy, then you can tell them that they're victims of equality. German Christians are victims of Jews. White Americans are victims of Black American equality. Once you convince people that they have earned a position on the hierarchy over others, then you can tell them that equality is actually victimhood. Law and order in fascist politics means the members of the minority group who accept their subservient role, they're law-abiding, and the members of the dominant group, by their very nature, are law-abiding. So law and order doesn't mean justice. Law and order doesn't mean equality. Law and order structures who's legitimate and who's not. The fascist leader comes and tells you, your women and children are under threat. You need a strong man to protect your families. They make conservatives hysterically afraid of transgender rights or homosexuality, other ways of living. What the fascist politician does is they take conservatives who aren't fascist at all, and they say, look, I know you might not like my ways, but you need someone like me now. You need someone like me because homosexuality, it isn't just trying for equality. It's coming after your family. Fascist movements rest on an urban-rural divide. The cities are where there's decadence, where the elites congregate, where there's immigrants, there's criminality, there's Sodom and Gomorrah. The pure, hardworking, real members of the nation live in the rural areas where they work hard with their hands. When our politicians talk about inner city voters or urban voters, we all know what they mean. Arbeit macht frei, work shall make you free. This was written on the gates of Auschwitz. The idea is that the minority group, they're lazy and they need to be made to work. Labor unions are run by communists who are trying to make things easier. Hard work is a virtue. In liberal democracy, we don't value people by how hard they work. Each of these individual elements is not in and of itself fascist, but you have to worry when they're all grouped together. When honest conservatives are lured into fascism by people who tell them, look, it's an existential fight. I know you don't accept everything we do, you don't accept every doctrine, but your family is under threat. Your family is at risk. So without us, you're in peril. Those moments are the times when we need to worry about fascism.
Yes to disarmament, yes to peace. That's the name of Mexico's nationwide campaign to get guns off the streets, as part of its official crackdown on the violence and organized crime plaguing the country.
I heard about the program, and it seemed like a good option to get rid of a gun that I had that could cause an accident in my family. It's necessary because there is a lot of crime, and the government and the police are not enough to counteract it.
The disarmament program promises no police investigation or prosecution for those who turn in weapons and offers financial incentives. Gun owners can drop off the weapons at churches and will receive around $430 for a revolver, $1,200 for an AK-47 rifle, and $1,300 for a machine gun. Firearms turned in are later destroyed, removing them from public access. Children are able to trade in toy guns for other toys, a strategy that Mexico's president says is to transform children's entire mindset around weapons.
Why teach our children something connected to violence? Instead, we replace these war-related toys with educational ones or other types of toys. We do not want them to see violence as a way of life, because it is not. It is a path to death.
Mexico is gripped by violent crime linked to the multi-billion-dollar illegal drug trade, and authorities attribute the weapons problem as illegal arms smuggled in from the US. According to preliminary data from the National Statistics Institute, the country recorded over 31,000 homicides in 2023, 70% of which were caused by firearms.
More incredible videos of the celebrations underway at a massive Hindu gathering in India. This is the largest religious event in the world, and it brings together religious leaders and their followers to bathe in the sacred rivers in India's north, right where the Ganges and the Yamuna rivers meet. The festival lasts for 6 weeks. More than 400 million people are expected to take part, and Salima Shivji tells us more from Mumbai.
Many Hindu devotees have long been waiting for. A Maha, or Grand Kumbh Mela, comes around every 12 years. It's an auspicious time for people to bathe in the rivers considered most holy in Hinduism. But this year is especially significant, and that's because the planets, the sun, the moon are all perfectly aligned to make this one more spiritual for devotees. And it's already the largest religious gathering in the world. It's so big it can be seen from space. And today alone, some 20 million people have bathed in the waters considered holy at the spot where the Ganges, the Yamuna, and the mythical Sarasvati rivers meet.
I feel goosebumps. I can visualize myself being there. It was one of the most wonderful experiences of life. And
the devotees today, led by thousands of Naga sadhus, holy men smeared in ash, naked and plunging into the waters. The river is thought by devout Hindus to purify souls and wash away sins. This year, a staggering 400 million people are expected to converge on this area. Indian nationals, as well as many foreigners, visitors from other countries, coming to bathe in those waters for this special festival, which lasts 45 days. It is a staggering organizational feat to accommodate all of these people. Basically, tens of thousands of portable toilets have been set up, as well as sprawling tent cities, which take over land that is about 4,000 hectares, which is the equivalent of 7,500 football fields. And this year there are extra security measures in place to try to avoid any disasters, any crowds crushing people as they move forward into the waters. There are checkpoints with hundreds of police officers monitoring the crowds, as well as AI-operated surveillance cameras to make sure everything goes smoothly. There are also drones, both in the air and underwater for the first time, to make sure the festival, which lasts 45 days, goes smoothly. A festival that's already so immense and popular that this year is expected to break previous attendance records. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Your area will not help and cooperate with ICE. Tell me why.
Well, we are of the belief that the federal government cannot federalize local police. We believe there's a distinction between the federal government and local government with regard to policing. What we think is the following. They establish their priorities in law enforcement. We establish our priorities. Where those align, that's just fine. Where they don't align, we are going to pursue our high priorities. Okay. And, however, none of that involves obstructing the federal government. It involves following our priorities.
Okay, so cannot federalize local police. I was looking at some cases in Santa Cruz, Mayor. 2022, the FBI reinvestigated a hate crime. 2008, it investigated fire bombings there. That was the FBI. I'm sure you had no problem with the FBI being involved then. Here was the mayor of Boston today about what she wants to see. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
If you wanted to make us safe, pass gun reforms. Stop cutting Medicaid. Stop cutting cancer research. Stop cutting funds for veterans. That is what will make our city safe.
Isn't there a contradiction there that you're happy to have the federal government's help, but when they want your help, you say not so fast? Is there a middle ground there at all?
Oh, well, I think the ground is this, that we cooperate when there are, for example, we had an MS-13 situation a few years ago. There was a joint federal, state, local task force for getting MS-13 out of here. No problem whatsoever. We have a shared alignment of values. But this is not a shared alignment of values, what they're doing at this point. We are not going to obstruct them, but we are going to not allow the federal government to federalize our police force.
So you say it's not shared values. I'm looking at average ICE arrests per day. President Biden, his administration was deporting on average 255 people per day, ICE was. Did President Biden not have your shared values?
Not on that issue.
What about President Trump at the border? Do you give him credit for Southwest border encounters dropping drastically down to 8,300 in February?
Absolutely. The federal government is in charge of the borders, not the city of Santa Cruz. They want to secure the borders. That's their business. In the city of Santa Cruz, we'll set our priorities. The federal government can set theirs. Where they align, great. Where they don't, we're following ours.
You call yourself a sanctuary city? Do you embrace the term?
Absolutely. I think trying to come up with ways to not say what you're doing is disingenuous. We are a sanctuary city. We don't apologize for that. We also don't allow the federal government to federalize our local police department. We will not obstruct them. What we say is we have our priorities and we won't obstruct yours. But we are going to follow our priorities. Home invasions, petty crime, criminal activity involving fentanyl. We have local priorities we're going to work on with our law enforcement. Federal government has other priorities. That's their business.
Long time, long time, long time.
Woo! That's it, Al. You're doing great.
What happened to that one kid I used to hang with all the time?
You don't remember?
Remember what?
You really don't remember.
I don't know what more you want me to remember.
What are you gonna do? He's now or never.
Hello.
Now, fellow at Brown University Watson's Institute for International Public Affairs, Mark J. Dunkelman. He's the author of the new book with the title, Why Nothing Works, Who Killed Progress and How to Bring It Back. Give us a better sense of that central argument. The progressives, well-meaning progressives, have gotten in the way of projects that they inherently should be supporting.
So the beginning of the progressive movement was an effort to build up big institutions that could do big things, to wire up the Tennessee Valley, which is sort of the quintessential example of the New Deal bringing electricity to poor farms in a swath of the country about the size of England, and was enormously powerful. The federal officials who did that could make decisions sort of not almost on a whim. There was no pushback from the community, and there couldn't be. And we woke up, progressives, in the 60s and 70s and realized that these officials weren't always doing the things that were the best for the country, that some of them were self-serving, corrupt. They were taking too much power for themselves, and we decided that the solution was to give more power to ordinary people to fight back. And so for the last 50 years, we've really spent our time and focus trying to build new checks on federal power so that Robert Moses-type figures don't abuse and coerce people who typically don't have a lot of power. And the checks are now so voluminous that you can't get good things done just as much as you can't get bad things done. So we've got lots of projects we need to do in this country, but it's just too hard to get them accomplished.
We're seeing what Elon Musk and empowered by President Trump are doing. They've vilified government, tearing it down, and potentially its ability to do big things or even some small ones.
The frustration that people have that government simply doesn't work was bound to be, it was bound to open the door to a MAGA-type populist movement. If our basic premise is that the Democrats are the party of government and government isn't working, then that's a terrible political challenge for Democrats who want to be elected. We need to be showing that we're going to make government work again, that we're going to be able to empower the right people to make important decisions. These are things that we should be accomplishing on our own, and we should be thinking more about how we get that done rather than creating additional barriers. I think that the public's perception is it's just impossible to get a good idea off the ground today. And so if government doesn't work, why are we going to give it more power?
The progressives' argument is that at some point Musk will cut things so badly, I mean, perhaps not so extremely, but so inefficiently, that the general public will start to feel the impact. There'll be some kind of a crisis and people won't be able to get the healthcare they need or the transport services they need, or something will go wrong. If it doesn't go wrong, what does that say to Democrats about the role of government and how government should have been reformed?
The point for us is that rather than us promising more and more from government, We need to be spending more time talking about how the things that government is doing need to be done more effectively, so that the experience that you have with government is a positive one. Our agenda as progressives needs to be, we are going to create a system where everybody has a voice, but nobody has a veto, and we can get things done expeditiously.